It was supposed to be just another quiet royal lunch at the palace, until a single question from Prince Louis shattered the calm. "Why do you call her queen if she's not grandma?" he asked, wide-eyed and curious. The room froze. Queen Camilla's smile vanished. The weight of royal history, scandal, and unresolved wounds came crashing down in an instant. A child's innocent words reopened a chapter the monarchy had tried to close for decades. What followed wasn't just silence. It was tears, emotion, and a nation reminded that even behind crowns, the truth always finds a voice. The moment that stunned the palace. The royal lunch had just ended. The long dining room in Windsor Castle carried the low hum of soft laughter, scattered cutlery, and half-whispered conversations among senior royals and guests. Everything seemed perfectly routine, until it wasn't. Out of nowhere, a small voice broke through the buzz. Innocent, curious, piercing. "Why do you call her queen if she's not grandma?" Prince Louis, 5 years old, the youngest royal in the room, and in that moment, the most powerful. You could hear the silence hit. Chairs stopped creaking. Coffee cups remained mid-air. All eyes turned toward Queen Camilla, who had just taken a breath to speak with someone across the table. Her words died on her lips. She turned her head slowly toward Louis. Her eyes didn't blink. Her hand clutched the stem of her glass a little too tightly. It was like watching someone get caught in a moment they'd feared for years, but never believed would happen like this. No one dared to speak. Even King Charles looked down at the tablecloth. Prince William's jaw tightened. Kate froze. Camilla tried to smile, but her lips shook. Her eyes shimmered. And then, like a thread finally snapping, she blinked away the first tear. It wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't rage. It was pure, stunned heartbreak. A question so innocent had suddenly peeled the curtain back on years of royal tension. Too deep, too complex, and far too sensitive to explain to a child. Yet the truth, as always, had its own timing. The ticking of the antique clock on the wall filled the room. Tick, tick, tick. Time kept moving, but no one else did. And Queen Camilla, standing in the middle of it all, looked more exposed than ever before. Why Louis's question cut so deep? To anyone else, it might have sounded like a simple question. Childlike curiosity, no malice, no edge. But to Camilla, and to everyone who knew the history, it was a dagger wrapped in innocence. Prince Louis is far too young to grasp the decades of scandal, headlines, betrayal, and royal negotiations surrounding Camilla's title. But he's not too young to notice who's missing from family photos, or to hear bedtime stories that speak lovingly of Granny Diana, or to notice the name Elizabeth is spoken with reverence and sorrow. To him, those were grandmothers. Camilla? She wasn't. The palace is soaked in history. Every hallway, every portrait, whispers stories of what could have been. And even children, without understanding the details, can feel the weight. Louis, in his soft voice, unknowingly asked a question that still haunts the walls of Buckingham and Windsor alike. Camilla's title of Queen Consort was never universally accepted. There were compromises, delays, clarifications, and even after the coronation, a quiet tension always lingered. Louis's question had sliced through it like a knife. Behind his words lay unspoken challenges. Was the public ever truly ready to see her as queen? Had she truly earned it? Or was the title merely the result of palace strategy? Louis didn't mean to judge, But his innocence made it impossible to ignore what the world had spent years trying to smooth over. And for Camilla, it hit harder than any newspaper ever had. Camilla's complicated place in the royal family. Camilla's journey into the royal fold was never smooth. It was a climb up a mountain covered in thorns. From the very beginning, her name sparked division. She wasn't just stepping into a marriage. She was stepping into a legacy already marked by one of the greatest royal tragedies in modern history. The public never fully forgot or forgave how her relationship with Charles began. While Diana was alive, Camilla had always been the other woman. The whispers were loud, and the headlines even louder. Over time, the scandal faded, but it never disappeared. Inside the palace, opinions remained split. Some accepted her as Charles's choice and respected her presence. Others, especially those closer to Diana's memory, remained guarded, supportive in public, perhaps, but cool in private. Every public appearance Camilla made was measured. Every smile, every wave, weighed against the ghost of Diana. The public always watched for comparison. She had climbed her way to queen consort, but for many, she was still just Charles's wife. The coronation had solidified her title. The crown rested on her head. The media called it symbolic of healing. But in the eyes of many royal watchers, it was a role earned by longevity, not legacy. And behind the palace walls, the echoes of doubt never truly stopped. Prince Louis, unknowingly, had reignited that shadow. A simple question had thrown Camilla's entire identity back into the spotlight. The history Louis doesn't know yet. There's a history Louis hasn't been told yet. One day, he will. But right now, it lives in the whispers behind closed doors, in documentaries quietly removed from family playlists, and in stories told by royal aides when they think no one's listening. The triangle, Camilla, Charles, and Diana, is one of the deepest wounds the modern monarchy has ever endured. It was messy, it was public, and it changed the face of the royal family forever. Diana's infamous interview in 1995 still haunts the monarchy. Her words, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." That sentence became a headline, a slogan, and a scar. Even Queen Elizabeth, known for her steel composure, reportedly resisted accepting Camilla for years. It wasn't until decades later that Camilla was even allowed to appear publicly beside Charles in any significant capacity. For years, there was an unspoken agreement. Camilla wouldn't take the title Queen. That promise was quietly altered, softened, then finally rewritten entirely. By the 2003 coronation, she was officially crowned, but not without controversy. And so, when Louis asked his question, he unknowingly tapped into a storm of history and pain. A moment that reminded everyone, the past isn't finished with them yet. Camilla's emotional breakdown. After the gathering dispersed, Camilla disappeared. Not in a dramatic rush, but in a quiet retreat. She excused herself with a soft murmur, nodded at Charles, and walked slowly down the hall. She entered her private quarters, closed the door, and didn't come out for hours. According to one staff member, the queen consort cried quietly but deeply. She didn't yell, she didn't collapse. But she sat in a chair by the window, staring out over the palace gardens, with tears silently marking her cheeks. Later, she reportedly confided to a longtime aide, "Maybe I was never meant to be here." Those words said it all. They carried decades of self-doubt, judgment, headlines, and hurt. She had spent years trying to prove herself, to to Charles, to the public, to history itself. But in that one moment, a child's question had undone it all. King Charles did come to comfort her. He sat beside her, placed a hand on hers, and whispered something no one heard. But even he looked shaken, because he knew this wasn't about protocol. It was about truth. And sometimes, truth is what hurts the most. Kate's delicate position. In the aftermath of that innocent yet seismic question, the burden didn't fall only on Camilla. It quietly shifted to someone else in the room, Catherine, Princess of Wales. As a mother, she immediately recognized the weight of what Louis had said. But as a future queen herself, she also understood the ripple effect this moment could cause. Later that afternoon, behind closed doors, Kate gently knelt in front of her son. She didn't scold him. She didn't correct his question. She simply said, "It was an honest question, but sometimes honest questions need careful timing." It was the tightrope she was used to walking, balancing royal duty with maternal instinct. To the public, Kate is graceful, unshakable. But internally, this moment put her in a rare bind. She had to defend her child without undermining Camilla, and she had to maintain family unity without betraying her late mother-in-law's memory. There were whispers that Kate and Camilla had a quiet conversation later that evening. A conversation not about blame, but about feelings. Some insiders say Kate told her gently, "He didn't mean to hurt you, but maybe we haven't done enough to help him understand you." Privately, though, Kate's emotions were more complicated. Her loyalty to Diana had always been woven into her marriage. She admired Camilla's efforts, but the scars left by Diana's story still shaped her worldview. And while she publicly supported Camilla's role, part of her still held that space, the sacred space that once belonged to Diana, with a kind of silent protection. And William? He said nothing. His silence was louder than any outburst. Because sometimes, silence carries generations of pain. Public's reaction to Camilla's tears. The story was never supposed to leave the palace. What began as a private, emotional moment triggered by an innocent question from Prince, Louis exploded into a full-blown media spectacle. But in a house built on legacy and rumor, silence never lasts long. Within just 48 hours, the story was everywhere. Prince Louis questions. Camilla's role. Royal tears follow, screamed across the morning papers. By midday, it wasn't just news. It was the biggest royal conversation in years. Social media had turned the moment into a wildfire. Twitter threads, Instagram reels, TikToks, all dissecting the same question. Did Louis just speak for the people? One tweet went instantly viral. "That little boy said what the whole nation has been thinking for decades." Another followed. "Diana's spirit just clapped." The comments weren't just reactions. They were echoes of a public still emotionally tied to the memory of the late Princess of Wales. Camilla wasn't just crying over a child's question. She was crying because the ghost of Diana still hadn't left the palace halls. News anchors scrambled to cover the incident. Morning shows invited royal experts, biographers, and body language analysts. Discussions got heated. One commentator claimed, "This moment proves that Camilla has never been fully accepted." Others defended her, saying she had done the work, paid her dues, and earned her place. Yet the debate kept returning to the same core issue: legacy versus love. TV panels debated whether Louis's question should have ever been made public. Some saw it as a violation of a child's privacy. Others argued it was a powerful moment of unfiltered truth. What complicated it all was the raw, visible emotion. Camilla crying wasn't something people were used to seeing. That image softened some hearts and hardened others. On fan forums and Facebook groups, debates turned into battlegrounds. Was Camilla a victim of history or a symbol of royal injustice? People posted clips of Diana's old interviews next to Camilla's recent appearances, comparing tone, grace, and presence. The internet became a courtroom, and the verdict kept swinging back and forth. But the most unexpected twist. Younger generations were joining the conversation in droves. Teenagers on TikTok shared videos titled, "Why Gen Z Still Sides with Diana," or "Understanding the Royal Rift." It wasn't just about protocol anymore, it was about values, truth, authenticity, legacy. And at the center of it all was a 5-year-old boy who didn't even know he'd broken the internet. The palace, meanwhile, remained silent. No official statement, no denial. Just whispers from aides that Camilla was taking time. But public silence doesn't equal public control. Not anymore. In fact, the silence only fed the flames. In just a few days, one innocent question reshaped public opinion, reopened old wounds, and redefined how the monarchy is seen, not by historians, but by the people watching it unfold in real time. Louis, the young royal who spoke truth. Prince Louis was never supposed to carry the burden of royal legacy. He was the youngest, the charming one, the one who made faces on the balcony during the Platinum Jubilee and made the world laugh. But in one quiet moment, he became something else entirely. He became the royal truth teller. It was never planned. No adult had coached him. But his honesty reminded everyone just how fragile the royal image really is. Because children, by nature, don't lie. They observe, they absorb, and when they speak from truth, even if it hurts. Online, fans began calling him the Prince of Clarity. Some even compared him to Diana, praising the purity of his heart and the courage of his voice. Of course, Louis didn't know what he'd done. He didn't know the storm he had stirred. But he had, in that moment, reshaped the conversation around Camilla and around what it means to wear the crown. Inside the palace, the reaction was less romantic. Aides began planning media training sessions. Meetings were held to discuss limiting Louis's exposure. And behind closed doors, some senior royals whispered, "What if he says something else?" But what they feared most wasn't the child's words, it was the truth they couldn't control. Unresolved questions around Camilla's role. Even before Louis's question, the debate around Camilla's title had never really settled. Officially, she was crowned Queen Consort. But in the minds of many, that title still came with an asterisk. The question hung in the air. Was it truly earned or simply given through strategy and persistence? Many still questioned whether Queen Elizabeth had fully supported Camilla's elevation, or if it had been a quiet compromise in her final years. Her public statement may have backed Camilla, but those close to the Queen knew she rarely revealed her full opinions. And then there's Diana, forever the third figure in this royal triangle. Would she have ever forgiven Camilla? Would she have accepted her role? Or would she, like much of the public, have viewed it as rewriting a painful past? Even now, in royal circles, Camilla's influence is hard to define. She's a presence at major events. She sits beside the king. But does she shape policy? Does she command loyalty from palace aides? Or is she still, as some put it, queen in shadow? Louis's question brought those doubts roaring back. It forced everyone to look again at Camilla's position, not just with protocol, but with emotion. And in doing so, It reopened wounds the royal family had worked hard to bury. Historical echoes. Royals who faced the same doubts. The British monarchy has long struggled with outsiders. Camilla's struggle isn't new. It echoes through history like a haunting refrain. Wallis Simpson was the first in modern times to spark a constitutional crisis. King Edward VIII gave up his crown for her, but the price was steep. She was never fully accepted, always viewed as the woman who broke the monarchy. Then came Princess Margaret, Queen Elizabeth's sister. Her love affair with Group Captain Peter Townsend was seen as too scandalous, too forbidden. She chose duty over happiness and paid for it with loneliness. Years later, Sarah Ferguson, fiery, bold, and unconventional, entered the royal family like a storm. But her marriage to Prince Andrew unraveled publicly. She, too, was left on the outside, her every move dissected by a press eager to condemn. And more recently, Meghan Markle walked into the royal spotlight with hope and was quickly met with judgment. Her and Harry's departure and that explosive Oprah interview showed the world just how rigid the crown could still be. Camilla, like them, walked a path not built for outsiders. Louis's words may have cracked open something deep, but the truth is, that door was never fully closed. Every time a non-traditional woman enters the palace, history seems to ask the same question. Will they ever truly let her in? Charles's growing fragility. As days passed, the emotional fallout didn't end with Camilla. Behind palace walls, it was King Charles who quietly began to unravel. For a monarch who had waited his entire life to ascend the throne, his reign had already been shadowed by scandal, illness, and public skepticism. But nothing struck him quite like this. His own grandson, unknowingly questioning the woman he had fought so hard to legitimize. Those close to the king say he took it hard. He began canceling minor appearances, citing health concerns, but insiders knew better. Charles was hurting. It wasn't the question, one palace aide confided. It was the realization that the past is still very much alive. And it's in the room. He confided in his private secretary that night, wondering aloud, will I ever be seen as more than Diana's mistake? It was a rare confession. For decades, Charles had worked tirelessly to control his image, to redefine his role. But Louis's words peeled all that away. He sat with Camilla often that week, holding her hand in silence. But what haunted him most wasn't public opinion. It was the fear that the next generation would never truly embrace her, that even children born into the palace would carry the same doubts as the world outside. There's a limit to what a crown can protect. And for Charles, that truth was settling in. His reign began late. His legacy was still forming. And in a single moment, it felt like it had cracked before it was ever finished. The future of royal bloodlines. What happens when the next generation questions the last? That's the quiet crisis now facing Buckingham Palace. Because Prince Louis's comment wasn't just about Camilla, it was a reflection of what the monarchy might face moving forward. Charlotte and George, though older, are growing up in a world that questions more, tolerates less, and values truth over tradition. If Louis is asking these questions at 5, what happens when the others start speaking their minds? This isn't the age of silence anymore. It's the age of cameras, leaks, and live-streamed truths. Insiders say conversations have already begun behind the scenes. Aides are discussing revised education plans for royal children, not just history lessons, but legacy management. Because in today's world, the wrong quote from the wrong prince or princess doesn't just go viral, it shifts public perception in seconds. The question isn't just about Camilla anymore, it's about the structure she's a part of. Will Camilla's legacy fade when Charles is gone, or will she remain part of the royal image moving forward? That debate has now reached strategy rooms. Even more sensitive is the question of what kind of monarchy is being modeled for Louis. Will he grow up in a family that deflects, or one that adapts? Will he be taught to question, or taught to stay silent? This incident may have been accidental, but the consequences are long-term. One innocent question may have opened the monarchy to something it rarely faces: genuine evolution from within. What happens next? For a few brief hours after Louis's comment, silence wrapped the palace like a winter fog. But as with every royal scandal, the real question isn't what happened. It's what comes next. Will Camilla step forward and address the moment publicly? A short, heartfelt comment could help regain sympathy, but it also risks reawakening criticism. Her team is debating. One source close to Clarence House admitted, "She's never been this emotionally exposed. A response could heal or reopen the wound." Meanwhile, Louis's public appearances have been quietly reduced. Not officially, but noticeably. Palace insiders suggest it's part of a temporary media strategy. Yet the question remains, will Louis be muted or molded? There's already discussion about whether this moment could trigger a second wave of the Diana versus Camilla debate. The royal family has worked hard to distance themselves from those painful years, but history has a way of circling back, especially when the public still feels unresolved. And then comes the institutional question. Will the monarchy use this as a moment to reshape the queen consort's role? Could it lead to a rebranding, one that finally confronts instead of conceals the past? As the public continues watching, waiting, whispering, one thing is clear. This wasn't just a moment between a grandmother and a child. It was a quiet earthquake. One that shook centuries of royal image with 5 simple words. And now everyone, from the palace to the people, is bracing for aftershocks. In a palace built on tradition, it took a 5-year-old's question to shake the walls. Queen Camilla's tears weren't just personal, they were historic. As the monarchy faces a new generation unafraid to ask real questions, the crown must decide: cling to silence or embrace the truth that won't stay hidden.